Now, how many of you heard of the October lull? The October lull has been around a long time. We've talked about the myth of the October lull. We've talked about why the October lull begins, but a lot of people don't realize the October lull begins in September for a lot of people. And it's a very real occurrence, although it's not for the reasons you probably think. A lot of people think that the October lull begins, acorns are falling down. Deer in a transition phase where they're in their early season to their fall patterns. A lot of times the October lull, most of the time, takes place because of hunting pressure. And so when I look at number one right here, the September lull begins within a week. What does that mean? It means the September lull begins within a week of when your season begins. If your season is September 1st, September 7th, 6th, 10th, whatever it is, the 15th, the 18th, 19th, like it is in Minnesota and Wisconsin this year, it's going to begin by the 20th, 25th of September. And just like those folks that have an opening day and are experiencing that on October 1st, their October lull, the lull, whatever it might be, whatever you call it, begins about a week after that October 1st opener. The October lull begins because hunting pressure has been applied. The deer recognize something's different in the woods. Maybe you've been working on stands, blinds, moving things around, planting food, but as far as going sitting in the woods and having deer come into your downwind, smell your scent, make noise getting in and out of stands, maybe spook them on food plots. They know something's changed and they quickly change their patterns to react to the patterns that you've now displayed and given them and shown them because the seasons began. So the September lull, like the October lull, begins just about a week, 10 days after the season begins. Number two, how do you keep from creating the lull in the first place? Because not every property, the properties I hunt, the properties I try to work with my clients, the properties I want you to have that I try to create strategies for, I don't want you spooking deer. So if you're not spooking deer on the way in and out of stands, you're not overhunting food plots, you're hunting smart, you're hunting the best days, if you're talking about all the strategies and utilizing all the strategies we talk about, then you're not spooking a lot of deer, and therefore the lull never begins. The lull doesn't begin because acorns are dropping in the woods, and that's another thing. People say, well, they're not coming out to the food plots now. We saw 10 deer the first time, 5 deer the next, 3 deer the next time. We haven't seen a deer the last few times you sat because the acorns are falling. No, it's because you sat 7 times on that food plot. Every time in and out, you had the risk of spooking deer, and you did. And now the deer are staying in the woods. It just is coincidence that the acorns are falling. Because if the acorns are falling, think about it, those are hard to digest for deer. They're not that much different than woody browse as far as digestibility. Even corn is hard for deer to digest. I mean, heck, it's hard for us to digest. They want to hit those green food plots that you have. So if they're not coming out to those green food plots, typically that means that you've overhunted the green food plots. I find after the season opener, when you have those cold front evenings, and I'm saying the highs you could be down in Florida, and the highs that have been in the mid 90s are now 82, low 80s. Big cold front drop, probably a big weather system went through to drop that temperature too. That's what puts those mature bucks on their feet during daylight before dark. They'll be on those green fields regardless of what's dropping in the woods and what kind of soft mass they have or hard mass. They want to get out to those food plots and especially those green food sources and wash that down, especially acorns, especially briars and browse. It's hard to digest, so that's why they hit that green, and you can even count on them more so doing that during the middle of September, middle of October, after the season's begun, because of those consistent cold fronts that are coming through the landscape and hitting a habitat and woods near you about every week to 10 days throughout the season. And again, we use HuntCast from HuntWise to predict those. Easily can see those major cold fronts a week to 10 days out in advance. So don't spook deer. Seems pretty simple, but a lot of properties aren't designed that way. A lot of hunts on public land aren't designed that way. And as soon as you go out there and you apply your pressure, deer recognize that pressure and the lull begins. Access, evening priority, light mornings. Really pay attention to being a predator when you get on and off your parcel. Your access has to be very sacred when it comes to not spooking deer. Evening priority. Deer are moving in the evening a lot during September and October and hitting those feeding fronts that causes them to get on their feet. When they feed 5 times in a 24-hour period. So when that happens, they're missing quality feedings when a big cold front comes through and there's lots of storms, thunder, lightning, heavy rain, heavy winds, switching winds. They're not on their feet. As soon as that breaks, think about it, they miss 3, 4, 5, 6 feedings, quality feedings out in the open fields, good quality food, then they can't wait to eat, and they put the feed bag on. They're very active after those storms go through, and they'll hit those evening food sources early. And that might be, and a lot of times is, during September and October, the best way to shoot a mature buck, because he's now on his feet just an hour earlier, 2 hours earlier, getting to his favorite food source. And you're hunting that, and you're biding your time, and you're being patient, and you're hunting that stand when the hunting is good, and you're placing that priority on the evening. And if you hunt mornings, you're hunting lightly, you're getting in and out in locations where you think, the first thing you think about is, will I spook deer off food sources when I go into the stand in the morning? If the answer is yes, nothing else matters. If the answer is no, the second step is, why would bucks be traveling through this area in the morning? Maybe it's a long stretch of acorns between an ag field or a distant food source, a clear cut, and they're just going back to a bedding ridge or point or swamp where they're staying during the daylight hours. And you're just getting in that connection where they feel safe, it's remote, and they're just slowly working back to their bedding areas. Again, hunting that quality cold front morning opportunity. I had a great hunt in Michigan. I believe it was 2012. It was around October 12th, right around in that range. Could have been the 13th, 14th, or 2014. I get mixed up on these years, but I believe it's 2012. And there's a major cold front that came through. Temperature dropped, 50-mile-an-hour winds, 25-degree temperature drop in the morning. It was that first toe-numbing morning, October 12th. And I was rewarded with that long movement back to bedding on a really nice bow bunk in lower Michigan. So that can happen. But if you're hunting mornings and you're spooking out those evening opportunities, then you're just doing more harm than good, and you're creating the conditions that create the lull, or at least the potential for the lull. Don't overhunt. You know, again, if you have that great opportunity for an evening sit over a food source and these deer have showed you that pattern, then don't get in there on the bad days. Don't think that, okay, I'm gonna hunt this 6 days in a row and I'm gonna get that buck. Well, if you go in there the wrong time the first time, you're probably not getting them 4 weeks later, let alone a sit later or 4 days later or the next day. So you really be patient, go in with surgical strike when the conditions are great, and make sure that you're practicing. More time on the couch means more mature bucks, means consistent buck opportunity. Anybody can go sit out on a bucket and shoot a nice buck every 30, 40 years and say, hey, that's what I did. It was easy. Just go out there and sit. Didn't wash my hunting clothes. Didn't even have hunting clothes. Just went and sat on a bucket. Buck walked by at 30 yards. We'll try to do that every year. Try to do it multiple times every year in multiple states. If that system works in multiple states every year, oldest bucks in the neighborhood, more power to you, whatever system you're using. That's awesome. You found, a key to success. If you can apply that to small parcels, big parcels, private land, public land, then you found a recipe for success. What I've found is if you're over hunting, you're not going to find that consistent success. Instead, find a surgical strike method that you can go in, hunt the weather, be patient, and you'll find consistent success. It's a hunter thing. It's not a changing habitat thing. It's not a deer thing. It's not a herd thing. The lull, whether it's September or October, is created by you, the hunter, me, the hunter. We create the lull. We create the conditions. The closer you are to understanding that and really learning that your pressure applied is when the lull begins, then you're going to have all season consistent success every year by managing your pressure and reducing the amount of pressure that the deer perceive on your hunting land, whether it's public or private land. But I'll tell you what, if the lull is already beginning for you in September and moving into October, that lull is probably going to be there all season long. It'll affect the number of bucks, the age of bucks that you see during the rut, even during the rut when things are sacred and hollow. If you're hunting and pressuring, hunting at the wrong times, then you're going to find that the lull persists the entire season, not just in September and October. Instead, reverse that. Learn what causes the lull. Learn that it can happen at any time. Learn that it's applied by hunting pressure. And what you might find is that if your season opens September, you don't have to wait till the October weeks for the lull to begin. It's going to begin soon after you hunt. So watch that. It's no different than we love to drive around the fields right now and look at the deer. that are coming out in the evening. But you'll find where you hit those open areas where a lot of people are watching over and over again, those bucks take off fairly quickly, especially those older ones. We were driving the fields, it was a couple weeks ago, and we had a big giant buck, very wide. I'd say he's 22 inches wide, 23 inches wide. Dylan was a 160-inch buck. He was big. We're driving, we'd already watched him. As soon as we stopped to watch him, he ran off the field. And this was a big field, 80 acres or something. It was a bottom. He ran off. The other bucks just kind of stood around. The does and fawns, they kind of stood around. It was interesting. There's another car coming by, and we were already moving and going, and the person had their window down, and all they said is, "Did you see him? Is he out yet?" You know, that kind of comment. And I got the impression that whoever gets by there first and sees them and spooks them is the only one that's going to see that mature buck. And that's what happens, even hunting pressure applied on the road, just scouting, let alone when you go in the woods, in their sacred area, whether it's a bedroom, a transition area, or a food source, water hole, mock scrape, whatever it is, you can't afford to apply hunting pressure, because that begins the lull every season. And what I want for you is for you never to experience a lull, because you do the opposite of the things that apply enough hunting pressure to create the conditions for the lull. The lull's a myth. Learn that it's created by hunters, and you'll be a better hunter this fall yourself. Folks, I want to make sure you check out my web class video series, whether it's how to design your food plot program or how to design your property in general. And we have a new one coming out that'll be how to hunt the rut. But these bucks back here are a testament. Some of these bucks go back to 93. They're even in different states. I urge you to check out those web classes that you can help yourself, help your land, help your hunt. The link is in the description. And also for those that have tried them out, I encourage you to offer some feedback in the comments below. Thank you.